Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do the second part of the A Song of Ice and Fire Iceberg. You guys seem to really enjoy the first part. You know, I'm a very small channel at this point, but I did get 50 views on that channel and a few likes. And, you know, for a small creator like me, that means the world. So I can't express how happy that makes me. So, because, you know, generally speaking, you guys seem to enjoy it quite a bit, I'm going to do the part 2 to that video right now. So, if you're not aware of how an iceberg video works, basically we're going to take a topic, in this case, a Song of Ice and Fire, and we're going to go deeper and deeper down the iceberg. The deeper you go, the more obscure the fact about that topic is, or that theory is. So, in the first part, we did the first two tiers of the iceberg, where things were pretty, either very much basically canon, or they were pretty much just things that we could infer from the text, without things being explicitly said. Today we're going to be doing tiers 3 and 4. These tiers are going to be a lot more about things that we either have to assume are never going to be outright explained, or things that are just kind of silly and we can kind of have to do some mental gymnastics in order to work out. But I am very excited to do this. You know, theory crafting is one of my favorite things in all of fandoms. You know, I love us becoming little detectives trying to figure things out. What does it all mean? And without further ado, let's dive into Tier 3, going deeper. The Green Grace is the Harpy. So in A Dance with Dragons, when Dany is the Queen of Meereen, inside the city there is an organization known as the Sons of the Harpy, who are a militia group whose main purpose seems to be to reestablish the old way, such as slavery and other institutions that Dany has outlawed inside the city. And the leader of this organization is named the Harpy, and we never really find out who that person is. A lot of people posit, however, that the leader is most likely the Green Grace. There's some reasoning behind this. You know, for one, the Harpy in mythology is known to be a female creature, so it would make sense for the leader of the Sons of the Harpy to be a female. The Green Grace really pushes for Dany to marry Hizdar. Hizdar is a person inside the city who very much wants to reestablish slavery also. So, and that lines up with the Harpy's views, so that makes sense. The Harpy seems to be very much aware of what's going on militarily with Dany's people. And Dany does tell the Green Grace a lot of stuff that's happening militarily inside of the city. And also, when Dany kind of throws down the law and says that she'll marry Hizdar if there is so many days of peace. I think it might be like 80 days or something to that effect. Peace inside the city. She'll marry Hizdar, and when she makes that proclamation, peace is immediately set. There are no more killings done by the Harpy, and so I think it very much makes sense for the Green Grace to be the Harpy. I definitely agree with this one. So let me know what you guys think about that one, but in my opinion, it's almost basically true, and I think we will get that reveal come the Winds of Winter. Quaithe equals Shiera Seastar. So in the books, there's this character named Quaithe who appears to Dany in dreams and just at random times throughout the story, and gives her very vague advice and warnings to, you know, go this direction, avoid this person, beware that thing. And it's never really revealed who this person is, really, under the mask that she wears. A lot of people, however, posit the idea that she is actually Shiera Seastar. Shiera Seastar was the love interest of Brynden Rivers, who most likely later became BloodRaven, one of the most powerful magic users in all of the story. So a lot of people believe that it is likely that under BloodRaven's, instruction, that Shiera Seastar is trying to get Dany to go to Westeros in order to use her dragons to defeat the others. Because if you think about it, if there's going to be any one thing that can defeat the others pretty handedly, it'd be dragons. And also, Quaithe only shows up to Dany after she has the dragons. This makes a whole lot of sense for a lot of reasons. If you want to believe that BloodRaven is a good guy whose only intention is to defeat the others, it makes a lot of sense for him to send people out to try to recruit very powerful assets like Dany, and Shiera Seastar would be one of the first people that he would turn to do so. My one big problem with this is in the Bran chapter where BloodRaven talks about the love of his life. He uses kind of like a past tense phrasing, making me think that their relationship is over, or she's dead, or it didn't end very well. So if Quaithe is Shiera Seastar, that makes me think that she's doing it without BloodRaven's permission or without his knowledge, which is still a possibility. But to me, that's my biggest problem with it. So with this theory, I'm going to put it in like the maybe section. But if it turns out that these are the same person, I really wouldn't be that upset about it. Arbor Gold is a motive indicating deception. So yeah, avid readers throughout the series have noticed that whenever a character is drinking Arbor Gold or Arbor Gold is present during a conversation, that's a pretty good idea that there might be some kind of deception going on. From my research into this theory, it seems to be most likely identity deception that is going on. There's another very closely related theory known as the Arbor Red theory, which is more just general lying, it seems like. But Arbor Gold is, present when Sansa and Tyrion's bedding ceremony is taking place, which the deception obviously there is that their wedding is a sham because it's never consummated. There's Arbor Gold poured when Tyrion is on the ship with young Griff and John Connington, which obviously the deception there is young Griff is really Fagon. So yeah, I mean, I don't think that this is really necessarily anything that George puts a lot of thought into. I think if anything, it's more of a coincidence, or at the very, very most, it's just like a plot. It's just like a narrative tool that he uses sometimes to point it out. Because there are definitely, times when there's a character present that is not who they're saying they are, and Arbor Gold is not present. So I think this is just one of those things where George might be doing it, but it's not like a super important thing. The Valonqar is Tyrion. So as we talked about last time with Jaime being the Valonqar, it's possible that it could be Tyrion. Tyrion does fit some of the ideas here. I mean, he is a younger brother of Cersei. And honestly, by the time A Dance with Dragons rolls around, Tyrion definitely wants to kill Cersei, so it makes a whole lot of sense. If he ever got the opportunity to do it, I think it'd be very likely. But I think from a storytelling point of view, it just has to be Jaime that does it. Jaime and Cersei are so closely connected. Jaime has this very big storyline going on with him, redeeming himself. And also Cersei, and she is often very much wrong in the most blatant ways. So even though she thinks it's Tyrion, it's really Jaime right underneath her nose. That's very much in her character. So is Tyrion the Valonqar? No, it's most likely Jaime. But I can see it being Tyrion if it push came to shove. But I just think from a narrative point of view, it has to be Jaime. The North remembers. So the North remembers is a theory. It's not really even a theory. It's more of just a statement of fact that all these Northern lords, they remember what it was like under Stark rule. A young woman, a maiden, could run around naked on her birthday and go unmolested in Stark lands because everyone knew that the Starks were such good people and good lords that no one dared to go against them. You have all these Northern lords and the Mountain Clansmen fighting for Ned's girl when they're talking about Arya, well, fake Arya, but still. And you have Wyman Manderly and the Dustins and the Umbers. You have all these people coming together, and they know that they're most likely going to die, or that there's so many opportunities for this plan to fail. But they remember what the Boltons and the Freys and the Lannisters did to their liege lords. They did it to their friend, and they remember, and they're going to bring hellfire to the land if that means putting a Stark back in Winterfell. Like I said, it's not even a theory. I think it's it's a very beautiful way of showing how important the Starks were. And I think when, whether it's Sansa or Jon or, even Rickon takes back their seat as the Warden of the North and Lord of Winterfell, I think it's going to be a very powerful moment and signifies that the North remembered. The Frey Civil War. So yeah, when we met Big and Little Walder Frey, it was pretty much confirmed that there is a very big, power fight inside of the Frey household about who is going to become the Lord of the Crossing when Walder Frey Sr. finally kicks the bucket. You have the people who are almost definitely contenders, his eldest sons and everything else. But there definitely seems to be a faction inside the Freys who are not above, killing their kinsmen in order to, claim their not rifle, but their seat on the lordship. And it's not the craziest thing in the world. We have seen throughout this story the idea of, the line of succession does not necessarily mean that is the person who's going to sit the throne or the seat. You saw that with Renly. He tried to advocate for that very powerfully. So I think when Walder Frey does kick the bucket, whether that's from Lady Stoneheart or Arya or even just old age, I think that there's going to be a power vacuum inside the Frey house, and we're going to see Frey against Frey. My only problem with it is I just don't know how it's going to fit inside the story. I do definitely think that come, the Dream of Spring, the Frey house is still going to be a very powerful house inside Westeros. George has gone on record saying the end of the story is going to be bittersweet. And I think when Bran is the king of the Six Kingdoms, I think it's very likely that one of the things he's just going to have to swallow is the fact that the Freys, who have betrayed his family on multiple occasions, they're still around, and I think that people are just going to have to deal with that. But with the Civil War, I just don't know where that's going to be in the story because we have so much other stuff going on. But I think it's very likely, yeah. Sweet Robin is Littlefinger's son. So yeah, I believe this one pretty wholeheartedly. I'm of the opinion that Jon Arryn and Lysa never had a son. For one, I don't think Lysa really ever really loved Jon all that much, and I think it's a very similar situation to what happened with Robert and Cersei, where she simply just didn't allow the possibility for a child to be born. Lysa was in King's Landing with Jon Arryn for pretty much the entire time he was, Hand of the King. Littlefinger was in King's Landing as a Master of Coin for a long time, so the timeline works. I think it's entirely likely that, Littlefinger was just trying to manipulate Lysa further. He knew he needed the Vale, so he wanted to get he wanted to get an inside person in the Vale, and he knew that Lysa wanted a kid, and she wanted it from him. So Sweet Robin was just another means to an end for him to get what he wants. It's a very Littlefinger thing to do. Now, I think the very sad thing about it is it's also very possible that Littlefinger is killing Sweet Robin. It's been very much indicated that his sickness is getting worse now that Littlefinger is in the Vale. And I think it's very likely that he's trying to kill, poor little Sweet Robin so he can become the true ruler of the Vale and get his hands on it. So, if Sweet Robin is his son, that just adds another layer. It's literally just the War of the Roses. So, yeah, I mean, George has definitely taken a lot of inspiration from the War of the Roses. You can see that even in the names of the two main families. You have the Starks and the Lannisters in the books, and in real life during the War of the Roses, you have the Yorks and the Lassiters. So, I mean, definitely some inspiration there. There's definitely some, inspiration when it comes to, the fight over the throne, that type of thing. But I think to say that it's literally just the War of the Roses is kind of taken away from George's work here. He's a very talented author, and pretty much every author takes some kind of inspiration when it comes to their story from real life. So to say that it's literally just the War of the Roses is kind of mean in my opinion. But yeah, there's definitely inspiration there, but I'm not going to sit there and just say that it's exactly the same. Mormont's Raven was warged. So Mormont's Raven says a lot of weird things and does a lot of weird things that can really only be explained away if you say that he was warged by somebody. And I think it's very likely that he was warged. The real question is by who. So, you have Mormont saying some very weird things, During the mutiny at Craster's Keep, he keeps on yelling about corn to some very hungry Night's Watchmen, which kind of leads them into being, murderous and killing Craster and the Lord Commander in order to get food. During the election for the Lord Commander, you had that moment when the Raven is inside the pot that they're collecting all the tallies in, and he flies out and lands on Jon's shoulder, yelling Jon Snow or yelling Snow or something to that effect. So yeah, he's definitely being warged. I guess the big question is just who is he being warged by? The obvious contender here is BloodRaven, and I can kind of see that. If you want to believe again that BloodRaven is trying to defeat the others, having a Lord Commander that is very much on the side of defeating the others and saving the realms of men, not just the Seven Kingdoms, but also the Wildlings, I think that would be very advantageous to have someone like Jon sitting as the commander of the Wall. I can definitely see that being a thing. So Yeah, I definitely think that that's the case here. I don't think we're ever going to get an answer to it. I don't even think BloodRaven's going to sit down and say, "Hey, Bran, I was warging a raven that got your brother elected, and Jorah Mormont killed, and all these other things." I don't think that's going to be a thing. If anything, we're just going to see when Bran wargs into BloodRaven's mind or something to that effect. We might see a hint at it, but that's about it. Sansa Stark is the younger queen. So when Maggie the Frog gives Cersei the Valonqar prophecy, one of the things that she says when Cersei asks if she's going to be the queen is, yes, Cersei will be queen until a younger queen comes and more beautiful than she and takes her place. And as such, we've been on the lookout for who this queen possibly is. The obvious red herring here is Marjorie Tyrell. Cersei obviously thinks that Marjorie is the quote unquote younger queen. Marjorie is very beautiful. Marjorie is the queen when she marries Joffrey and then Tommen. So that all makes a lot of sense. But I think with George's storytelling and Cersei being Cersei, most people kind of think that it's somebody else. And a lot of people think that it's Sansa, and that could make sense. Sansa was engaged to Joffrey, so she could be the younger queen. I personally believe that Sansa will become the queen of the North, so that makes a whole lot of sense. But I have a different idea of who the younger queen is, as we'll get to in the next tier. So I'm going to say no, that Sansa Stark was just another red herring for Cersei. But I do think it's kind of a fun thought experiment to say that the reason that Cersei allowed Sansa to be beaten so often by Joffrey was because she was kind of afraid that Sansa was younger queen until Marjorie showed up in King's Landing. The significance of black stone being everywhere. So yeah, when you read The World of Ice and Fire and small things throughout the main series of books, you'll notice that there's this really weird, oily black stone brought up quite often. You see it during a shy. It says that a lot of its buildings are made out of the stone. The Isle of Toads, there's this giant toad statue made out of this very peculiar stone, and the sea stone chair is made out of this very peculiar stone. Now, a lot of people want to try to make a little conspiracy out of this, saying that there's something here. I think what's likely is that it's just a reference to like Lovecraftian ideas. When you look at like the further east on the map of Planetos, you'll see that a lot of the cities that George has named uh, has a lot of Lovecraftian influence. And I really think that's all this is here. I think that George has a lot of inspiration from the Lovecraftian format when it comes to his horror building and his lore, and I really think that this is just a nod to from George to one of his favorite storytellers. BloodRaven killed Bobby B. So you'll see throughout the entire fandom that BloodRaven wargs just about literally everybody in order to accomplish something. Those are such common theories. BloodRaven warged Walder Frey and planned the Red Wedding. He warged Tyrion and killed Tywin. He did XYZ. So I personally think that if BloodRaven warged into the boar that killed Robert, that would be the exact opposite of what he wanted to do. Because if you think about it, if BloodRaven wants to stand up against the others and fight and try to win humanity's sake, having the Seven Kingdoms divided against themselves would have been the exact opposite of what he would wanted. And Robert Baratheon dying caused exactly that with Renly and Stannis and the Lannisters and Robb and the Iron Islands and all these other things fighting each other. It's just very much not what BloodRaven would want when the others are coming. Now, if you want to go down the route that the boar was warged by somebody, I think it's likely that it was actually Bran that did it by using his timey-wimey magic stuff, you know what I mean? Because if you think about it, with the War of the Five Kings, it actually did start a lot of things for Bran's family in particular that got them to where they need to be. It got Arya to becoming a faceless man. It got Sansa learning how to play the Game of Thrones and potentially becoming Queen of the North. You could possibly say that it got Jon elected Lord Commander. It got, and most importantly, in my opinion, it got Bran to go north of the Wall and learn his timey-wimey magic in the first place. So if you want to say that the boar was anything other than just a boar, I think you can say it was Bran and not BloodRaven. The Identities of the Six Dragons. So I actually didn't know a whole lot about this one until I did a lot of research into it. I found it very interesting. So Makoro has this vision in the flames where he sees six dragons. He sees an old and a young, a true and a false, a dark and a bright. And, so we've been trying to figure out what the identities of these six dragons are. Now, obviously, they're not literal dragons. That's just not how, prophecy works in this story. So we can say that the old dragon is most likely Aemon. He was the eldest Targaryen in the series. He is dead now. The young dragon is most likely Dany. I can see that definitely being true. The fake dragon is most likely Fagon because he's pretending to be a Targaryen. The true dragon is most likely Jon because R plus L equals J. He would be the true heir to the Targaryen line. Now, where it comes into difficulty is the bright and the dark. And for these, you kind of have to do other theory crafting. So for the bright dragon, the theory that I see most online is that it's Varys and that he's a bright flame. And the dark dragon is Darkstar, who is also a secret Targaryen. Now, we'll get to the Darkstar as a secret Targaryen theory in a little bit. And I don't know how I really feel about it, but if I had to guess the six identities of the six dragons that Makoro saw in the flame, those would be it. SummerHall Theory. So this theory refers to the tragedy of SummerHall that took place some 40 years before the start of the series. The tragedy was a fire that took the lives of, King Aegon V, his heir, Prince Duncan the Small, and the Lord Commander at the time, Sir Duncan the Tall. And it also happens to be the time where Rhaegar was born. We know almost nothing about what happened during the events of SummerHall. George has kept a pretty tight lip about it all. All we really know was that there were dragon eggs there, 7 to be exact, pyromancers were present, and wildfire was present. So I guess the biggest theory here that we could say it was Aegon was trying to hatch these dragon eggs. The wildfire went out of control, and the Lord Commander, he tried to save as many lives as he can, and he ended up saving more lives than otherwise would have been taken. And also, Rhaegar happened to be born that day, and I guess Rhaegar is really the biggest question here, because he was born during this awful tragedy. Now, we know that Rhaegar kind of thought a lot of himself in a lot of ways. He thought he was the prince that was promised for a long time. And then when he found out that that wasn't true, that was actually going to be one of his sons, he wanted to be a very powerful just knight in general. I think it would be a big tragedy if one of the reasons he thought about all these things being true was that he was born during a tragedy, but it was all just a coincidence, if that makes sense. I think one of the big tragedies of Rhaegar is he thought he was more important than he was, and I think this is just another reason to add to that. Hodor is descended from Duncan the Tall. So yeah, we know that Dunk liked to get around a lot. We know he slept with a whole bunch of women. He's kind of like the Genghis Khan of Westeros, it seems like. During a Bran chapter, when he's going back in time, we see a very tall man talking to a very young woman inside of Winterfell. Most people think that that's Duncan the Tall and Old Nan. We know that Hodor is, I think the grandson of Old Nan. And, Hodor is a very big boy, and Duncan was also a very big boy. So I think it's very likely that they are descended. Now, one thing I find very interesting is that Dunk, he later became the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard for Egg. And I think it's kind of a symbolic thing that Hodor would become the very first Lord Commander, quote unquote, for King Bran, and Hodor will eventually give his life to protect the future king. I think that's a very symbolic thing about how Dunk gave his life trying to protect the king, and Hodor would give his life to do the same thing, and they are related to each other. So, yeah, and also if you also want to believe that Brienne would become the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard under Bran, and that she is also related to Dunk. I think all these things make a whole lot of sense. So yeah. Septa Lemore equals Ashara Dayne. So when it comes to the people that were a part of the Fagon party early in Dance with Dragons, a lot of people want to assign those people identities that are different than the identities that we were given in the book. And that's because, young Griff turned out to be Fagon and Griff turned out to be John Connington. So it's a pretty nice assumption to think that every single person that was a part of that group was actually somebody else in disguise. When it comes to Septa Lemore, Tyrion notices that she acts very much not like a Septa. She teaches Fagon things that are kind of outside of the wheelhouse of a Septa. And also, more importantly, in a kind of a way, she is more promiscuous than a Septa should be. So a lot of people want to point that she might be Ashara Dayne. And there is a little bit of evidence for this in that Tyrion notices that she has stretch marks on her stomach, which is indicative of the fact that she gave birth at some point. We know that Ashara Dayne gave birth at some point, but so have a lot of women. So I don't want to put that as hard evidence. The big nail in the coffin for this theory for me is that Ashara Dayne is known to have very violet eyes. And I feel like George would have pointed that out to us when he was describing Septa Lemore, so that we could kind of weed this out on our own before the big reveal. That's kind of his style of writing. So I don't think that Septa Lemore is Ashara Dayne. When it comes to a character like Ashara Dayne, so many people want to assign her something because she seems like a very important character, and there's a lot of theories about her further down the iceberg. But when it comes to this one, I personally do not think so. Merlings. So the idea that Merlings exist inside the world of A Song of Ice and Fire is not the weirdest thing in the world. When Patchface drowns and he comes back up, some of his prophecies that he says that Merlings gave him, oxygen when he was beneath the water. There are reports of Merlings inside, or water-dwelling creatures inside the oceans. You have the Kraken being the sigil of House Greyjoy, so that has to come from somewhere. The sigil of House Manderly is a mermaid, so that has to come from somewhere. So the idea of Merlings being a thing in this world isn't entirely impossible. Now, I don't think they're ever going to come up in the series. I think when it comes to fantastical creatures, that dragons are kind of, and maybe ice spiders and those kind of things, are going to be kind of the limit for the time being. And Merlings seem to be like a Far Eastern kind of mythology that you would see in this story. So I'm going to put this one down as a no, but I'm going to put this one down as no, we're not going to see it in the story, but yes, they exist in this world. The Shavepate Poisoned the locusts. So in Dany's storyline towards the end of A Dance with Dragons, there is an event where Dany is supposed to eat these honey locusts, and Sean Belwas gets to him before her, and they turn out to be poisoned. And this is very obviously an assassination attempt done by somebody. And just like a lot of things in Dany's storyline at the end of A Dance with Dragons, we never found out what it was. It was never resolved. So we have theorized about who this could be. It could have been the Harpies. It could have been Hizdar. It could have been the Shavepate. It could have been a number of people, because Dany was not exactly popular inside of Meereen. Personally, if I'm going to throw my hat out there, I'm going to think it's Hizdar. I think Hizdar has a lot of reasons to want Dany dead. If Dany died, he would become the full ruler of Meereen. He could reinstitute pretty much everything that she had abolished. It's very likely that he would be able to work with the Harpy in some fashion. So I think it's Hizdar. But if it was the Shavepate, that doesn't entirely make not a whole lot of sense. Because Dany took away a lot of his power. He took away a lot of his merchant abilities. And generally speaking, he was just worse off for having Dany around. So I think it's very likely that, if Shavepate could have assassinated Dany, he definitely would have. But I just think that it's more likely to be Hizdar for the reasons I just listed above than it was the Shavepate. Cersei accidentally poisoned Joffrey. Alright, so I guess this theory here is Cersei was trying to poison somebody else at the table. If I had to make a guess, probably Marjorie. And when, Joffrey was doing his whole, Tyrion, you're going to be my cupbearer. The cups got mixed up somehow, some way, because Cersei didn't anticipate that. And Joffrey ended up drinking the drink. I wouldn't actually be all that surprised if it was accidentally Cersei. Just because it's very much in Cersei's character to try to plot out this major assassination of who she deems to be taking away her son and taking away her position, and then she accidentally kills her son. That is very Cersei. But I feel like if it was, we would have gotten some kind of indication inside of her POV in A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. A POV not thinking about something does not necessarily mean that it's not true. I mean, look at Ned and R+L=J. But I just think it's more likely that LittleFinger and Olenna did it. But honestly, if Cersei was the one who did it, I would not be all that shocked. So I'm gonna put this one in like the high maybe category, I guess. Sam is in possession of the Horn of Winter. So yeah, when Sam and Jon were beyond the wall in a Clash of Kings, they come across this cache of dragonglass, these Night's Watch robes, and this weird horn that never gets the opportunity to get blown at any point up to the story. And then, in A Feast for Crows, in Sam's POV, George goes out of his way to mention the fact that Sam is still in possession of this random horn, and a lot of people think that it is the Horn of Winter. Horns have become very prevalent inside the most recent, books inside the story, with, most namely Dragonbinder of Euron. And I think it's very, very likely that the horn that Sam has is the Horn of Winter. My only problem with it is I don't know how it's going to get back into the vicinity of the wall to bring it down. Euron isn't that far away from Sam logistically speaking, so it's very possible that Euron could steal the Horn of Winter at the end of the Winds of Winter and blow the horn, and that's the cliffhanger that we're left on at the end of the book. I think that's very likely, but I just don't think that I just don't know how logistically it's going to work, but for the sake of the theory, Sam being in possession of the horn, I think is very likely, yes. Why Wyman Manderly snuck into mayhaps. So, like we talked about when we talked about the Frey Pies theory in the last video, I said, and I stick by this, that Wyman Manderly is my favorite non-POV character. And we also talked about in the Frey Pies theory, it's very likely that Wyman Manderly killed a bunch of Freys, had them cut up and cooked into some pies, and fed them to other Freys. Now, to understand this theory, back in A Clash of Kings, when Bran is observing Big and Little Walder Frey, they are playing a game known as Lord of the Crossing, which is essentially King of the Hill. And whoever is the Lord of the Crossing has to be obeyed unless the other players can sneak into mayhaps when they are vowing their allegiance to him. If they can't sneak into mayhaps, then they are forgiven if they break the rules of the rules of the Lord in question, right? So, back in a Dance with Dragons, Wyman Manderly says, in reference to the fact that one of the Frey boys have just been murdered, that he says, mayhaps this is a blessing because he would have grown up to be a Frey. And that is obvious just shade, but a lot of people have noticed that he snuck into mayhaps. If you believe the Frey Pies theory, which most people do, then Wyman Manderly technically broke guest right and killed people under his roof, and the Freys. But he sneaks into mayhaps. Then by the rules of the Freys, then he is completely free and he has no obligation to turn himself in or be executed or anything like that. And it's very childish, but I think it's very Wyman Manderly to go to do that and throw in their faces later on that the Freys are just so terrible. God, I love Wyman Manderly so much. He's my favorite character. Oh my god. But yeah, I definitely think that this is true. A plus B equals J. So this is an alternative to R plus L equals J in that we have Ashara plus Benjen equals Jon. So we know that Benjen definitely flirted with Ashara. We don't really know if Ashara flirted back. We only know this because Ned was very attracted to Ashara, but he was just very shy. And Benjen, being the wild little wolf that he is, he jumped up and flirted with Ashara instead. And a lot of people point out the fact that this flirtatious could have been like a one night stand type of deal, and Ashara could have gotten pregnant with Jon. And then when Ned came back to Starfall, when he was returning Arthur Dayne's body, he picked up his nephew's he picked up his nephew and brought him back to Winterfell with him. The other big reason behind this theory is we never really found out why Benjen joined the Night's Watch. It's a very big question. A lot of people think maybe he felt that because he is a Stark, he felt very honor bound to Ashara because he got her pregnant, and he felt so ashamed of himself. He banished himself to the wall, not realize, and that could have been a thing. My only problem with this, beyond the fact that R plus L equals J has a lot more evidence, my biggest problem with this one is why didn't Ned just tell Catelyn that? Catelyn was very much hurt over Jon coming to Winterfell as Ned's bastard. It would have been very, very easy just to say, it's Benjen's kid. Benjen's a member of the Night's Watch. He can't, take care of his child, so I'm going to do it for him. That's a very Ned thing to do. I think Catelyn would have understood. So I don't understand why Ned wouldn't have said that. So I'm going to put this one in the no category. But I do like the thought experiment behind it. The Perfumed Seneschal equals Tyrion's ship. So early in A Dance with Dragons, Quaithe tells Dany to beware the Perfumed Seneschal, and from that point onward, Dany is constantly looking out for a member of her court who could betray her that fits that description. Attentive readers have noticed, though, that the ship that Tyrion is riding towards the end of the book is known as the Fragrant Steward. What is another word for fragrant? Fragrant? Well, that could be perfume. What's another word for steward? Seneschal. So a lot of people think that Quaithe was actually warning Dany about Tyrion arriving to come to her court. A lot of people think that Tyrion is going to be the devil on Dany's shoulder that's going to convince her to burn down King's Landing, as well as make other decisions that could ultimately bring her down, as well as just wreak havoc on all of Westeros. So I definitely believe this theory. I think it's very advantageous, a very good play on words by George. I think it's very in his writing style to pull this off. So I'm going to put this one in the definite yes category. I actually had never heard this theory until I was making the iceberg video here, and I like it a lot. LittleFinger Endgame. So the thing is, we really don't know what LittleFinger is trying to accomplish at the end of the day of all of his games. We know he's trying to take control of the Vale by killing Sweet Robin and then implanting either himself or a puppet leader inside the Vale that he can control, so he can have control over that. We know he has Sansa, which gives him the eldest living Stark, which would give him, the North, and if the Riverlands still want to fall under the Northern Banner, the Riverlands. We know, or it's theorized, he potentially has Tyrek Lannister, which would give him control over at least part of the Westerlands. He's allied himself with Olenna in the past, which gives him some kind of ability to manipulate the Reach. And we know that he's bankrupted the Iron Throne effectively throughout years as Master of the Coin. So my theory here is Littlefinger knows he can never become the actual king of all 7 kingdoms. He's too low born, and the vast majority of lords would not accept that. However, I think what he's trying to do is put in puppet rulers in all 7 kingdoms that he himself can control from the outside in and be effectively the leader by proxy. I think Littlefinger manipulating all of these, puppets is very much in his wheelhouse. And I think that'd be the ultimate way for him to get revenge for always being looked down upon, is working around the system so that he is effectively the leader, even if he is not the leader on paper. That's all very Littlefinger to me, in my opinion. So let me know down below what you think, though, because honestly, it could go so many directions, but that's my personal theory. Friends in the Reach. So when young Griff, John Connington, the Golden Company, and friends all are trying to plan their invasion of Westeros, the Golden Company references the fact that they still have friends in the Reach, and that the Tyrell hold on the country might not be as tight as they think. So this leads the question as to who are these friends. Well, we can assume is that the Tyrells, just given the general vibe of the sit-ins I just said. The Tarleys, however, make a whole lot of sense. The Tarleys did back up the Targaryens when Robin's Rebellion was taking place, so Randall Tarley might feel inclined to back up a Targaryen claim. The Red Wines, they are definitely no friends of the Tyrells and the Lannisters, so they definitely could back up the Targaryen cause. And there are a few other minor houses inside the Reach that definitely could fit the bill. And honestly, even the Tyrells, they're not very close friends with the Lannisters. So they might feel, trying to befriend this newcomer who has a major army on his back and a legitimate claim to take over the Lannisters. It could be very, very Tyrell to try to back them up. So even they might actually try to do it also. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, that is who the Friends in the Reach are. I'm very interested to see how that plays out in the story. But yeah, that's who I think they all are. The Hooded Man equals Septa Shale. So the Hooded Man theories are among my favorite theories in the entire fandom, and that's mainly because Theon's story arc in A Dance with Dragons is my favorite story arc in the series. If you don't know, the Hooded Man is a person that Theon runs into about halfway through a Dance with Dragons when he is really juggling his identity between Reek and himself, as well as dealing with the guilt of what he did to the Starks, his family, as well as the other characters inside of Winterfell after the events of the Clash of Kings. Septon Shael was the Septon of Winterfell, who mainly just held up the face of the Seven Sept for Catelyn while she was the Lady of Winterfell. When Theon took the castle, he had Septon Shael drowned in order to pay homage to the drowned god, as well as please the other Ironborn that were with him. So this theory says that Septon Shael, lived throughout that drowning, and has been hiding out in Winterfell. For all intents and purposes, Winterfell had been abandoned for at least a year, so he could have been hiding out there. And then when the Boltons showed up, he just hid. And then when he ran into Theon, he couldn't help himself by getting a little bit of analytical lyric in to try to downplay Theon even further as a little bit of revenge for trying to drown him. I personally don't think so, for a lot of reasons that it's Septon Shael, just because I think it's very obvious that he died. I think that's just another take that makes Theon feel very guilty. However, I will tell you who I think the Hooded Man is with the next theory, which is the Hooded Man equals Theon's guilt. This is who I really think is, the Hooded Man. And I know it can sound kind of arbitrary. Oh, it's just an apparition that Theon is seeing. Well, for one thing, you have to know about Theon is at this point in the story, his mental health is very, very worn. He's shattered in so many ways. It's very possible you could, not necessarily hallucinate, but just try to give an appearance to the guilt that he is feeling to try to deal with it. And make no mistake, Theon does feel so guilty about what he did. He knows he betrayed the Starks, who were ultimately good to him. He knows he killed these two Miller boys who were completely innocent. He knows all of this, and the one line that really cements it for me is when the Hooded Man pulls out a knife, and Theon thinks that he's going to be killed by this man because of all the murders taking place inside Winterfell at the moment. The Hooded Man says, it would be too much of a mercy to kill you, and I think if my theory and this theory is correct, that the guilt that Theon is experiencing is the Hooded Man. This is Theon telling himself that you deserve this pain. You deserve this torture by Ramsay. You deserve all this awful things happening to you. You don't even deserve the glory of death that you so want. I think that is very much in Theon's character. I think it speaks a lot to what he is going through at that point in the story, and I really think that just kind of cements the beauty and the horror and the amazing storytelling that is, the Reek Theon storyline. So, I mean, I could just be reaching out on this one. I know it can be kind of hard to swallow that this person is just an aberration or hallucination or manifestation of guilt. But I personally like this a lot, just from the character building that it gives Theon, and yeah, I love the theory so much. Ramsay and the Frey and the Snow. So, like I was talking about with the Hooded Man theories, there were a bunch of murders that took place inside Winterfell towards the end of the Winterfell A Dance with Dragons storyline. And we kind of have some answers about who did some of them. We know that the Spear Wives committed a couple, but one murder that never gets solved is the murder of little Walder Frey. Now, I think it's very likely that it was big Walder Frey that killed little Walder. It's very much in his character. He's very schemy. There's blood all over him, so it makes sense that you know even if big Walder Frey found the body and like hugged his cousin's dead corpse, the blood wouldn't be all over him in that way. But this theory says that it was actually Ramsay, and I mean Ramsay as a psychopath. The Freys are very much close to Ramsay. Ramsay was in a very bad mood the morning of the murder. So it could be that Ramsay just lost his cool and took it out on one of the closest Freys. But I just think it's more with the evidence going on that it was Big Walder Frey that killed him. It could be that Ramsay ordered the murder. I could see that being the case. But I just think storytelling wise, it has to be the other Walder that did it. But if it did turn out that it was Ramsay, I guess it makes sense. It's in character. But yeah, I'm just gonna put that one as a no though. Jon Snow will remain as Ghost. So when Jon is assassinated at the end of A Dance with Dragons, he says the word ghost, and most people think that this is him working inside of his direwolf in order to live on until his body can be reestablished and fit for his soul again. And yeah, I mean that makes a whole lot of sense. I guess this theory doesn't really ask the question whether or not Jon will become Ghost. I think it's pretty, pretty evident that he will. I guess this theory is just asking how long he's going to remain as Ghost, and I think this theory specifically is saying that he'll remain as Ghost for the rest of the story. I don't think so. I think he'll remain as Ghost for 3-4 chapters until Melisandre can get his body back into working shape and bring him back. Uh, I mean, it would be really fun to see all these chapters from Jon's point of view inside of a direwolf, and all these people once they figure out it's Jon trying to give orders or communicate back and forth. That'd be very cute, but it's not really George's storytelling, and I think Jon's character arc is going to flourish in The Winds of Winter and The Dream of Spring with his experiences after this, and he has to come back into his body for that to happen. So I'm gonna say no. Dario is Euron. Well, no, he's not, and that's an awful theory, but let me explain it, I guess. So, Euron does say that he was in Essos for a time, and, he does have his flair for the dramatic and the hair coloring and everything. So, I guess the theory is, Euron wanted to get in Dany's good graces, so he disguised himself as Dario and became a member of her war council in order to try to influence her in order to get Dany on his side. The problem, though, is Dario turns up the middle towards the end of the Storm of Swords, and by that point in the story, we know that the assassination of Balon Greyjoy is already either about to occur or it has occurred, and Euron is traveling back to the Iron Islands. And then in the Feast for Crows / A Dance with Dragons timeline, Dario is definitely in Essos. Granted, he's not constantly around Dany, so theoretically, I guess it's possible he's traveling back and forth, but no, because we know that Euron is on the Iron Islands, and then he's also on some ships later on, traveling traveling around trying to make his plans. So I'm gonna say no here about them being the same person. I think thematically they may fit the same purpose when it comes to Dany's character arc. Dario wants Dany to, embrace the dragon and, lay waste to her enemies, to fight for what is hers, to, lay claim by fire and sword and blood. And, I think come the end of A Dance with Dragons, when Dany really tries to, become the dragon, and she does, she realizes that is the answer. I think Euron is going to be putting that revelation and just dialing it up all the way to 10. And I think that they will, like I just said, they will fit a very similar character beat in her arc. But to say that they're the same person, no. Ramsay flayed Lady Hornwood's fingers. So before Ramsay married quote unquote Arya, who is really Jane, he was actually married to this woman named Lady Hornwood, basically just to get her lands, etc., etc. You know how the realm works when it comes to inheritance. But the story is that Ramsay locked her up inside of a tower for so long, and she got so hungry that she ate off her fingers in order to survive. And then later in A Dance with Dragons, from Theon's point of view, he mentions the fact that most people would rather eat off their fingers and cut them off once they've been flayed, because the pain is so intense that they rather just do that and get it over with. So this has led people to believe that Ramsay had actually just taken the skin off Lady Hornwood's fingers, and she either cut them off or ate them off to get rid of the pain. So yeah, I think this is definitely true. Ramsay loves his art form, so to speak, and to say that starvation isn't really Ramsay's method of torture. He does do it, of course, but I think he would rather just flay the skin off to see the reaction, and I think it's more likely, rather than her starving, she just bit the fingers off to get rid of the pain. So yeah, definitely in my opinion. Stannis is Azor Ahai. So I don't think so. I don't think there's any one Azor Ahai character in this story necessarily. And even if there is, it's definitely not Stannis. He is the red herring to that myth. However, I do think it's a very good nod to the idea of heroism. That even though Stannis is not this hero, he's not this warrior king. He's not this great person who goes out and sacrifices everything for the greater good. I think it's very telling that because people around him believe that he is Azor Ahai, and then he himself later believes it also, he is the only hero. He is the only king that comes to the aid of the wall to stop the wildling invasion, and by effect try to stop the other invasion. He is the only king trying to take Winterfell back from the Boltons. He is the only hero trying to do the right thing consistently, and I think that's mainly because he believes he is the hero, even though he's not. I think it's a very good, subversion of expectations when it comes to the idea of a hero in a story. That it's not necessarily that you are the hero, that you can become the hero. I think that's a very nice character beat for Stannis. But him being Azor Ahai proper, no, he is not. Southron ambitions. So in the show, Bran says after the reveal of the R plus L equals J thing that Robert's rebellion was built on a lie, and that was just not true. You see, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that a rebellion was coming, regardless of what happened to Lyanna and Rhaegar, because Hoster Tully had married off Catelyn originally to Brandon Stark, and then later to Ned, and then married Lysa to Jon, which effectively connected the Vale, the North, and the Riverlands into one giant alliance. And then also it could be assumed that the Stormlands were in on that alliance because Robert was the Lord of Storm's End, and he had grown up with Jon Arryn, so that makes a whole lot of sense. So 4 of the major kingdoms had to really align themselves to do something. And that something looks like to be rebel against Aerys, because Aerys had already begun to lose his mind after the tragedy at Duskendale. And I think it's very likely that even if, Aerys had not killed Brandon and, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on Ned's father's name, but the Lord of Winterfell and, Rhaegar had not taken Lyanna, I think if all those things had not happened, that the Southron ambitions to rebel against Aerys was already, moving, and it was going to happen anyway. So I definitely believe that, Hoster and, Jon Arryn, and I cannot remember Ned's father's name, but, the Lord of Winterfell, they were all planning something, and I definitely think it was that, so yeah. Hey everyone, this is me editing the video. It turns out I kind of overestimated how long it would take me to do the 3rd tier of the iceberg. I want to make these iceberg videos as digestible as possible, and if I included the 4th tier in this as well as the 3rd tier, the video would be well over 2 hours, and I kind of want to avoid that if I can. So I'm going to cut the video off here. The 4th tier will be out very, very soon. It's already all completely recorded and edited. I just have to, throw it into a video. I'll probably wait a few days just for the purpose of the algorithm, but I'm very, very excited with how this video turned out. I very much appreciate you guys watching this video towards the end if you're here. I work very hard on these videos, and every view, every like, every comment really means so much to me. So if you don't mind, please, like, subscribe, comment down below. Let me know if you disagree or if you have anything to add to any of my theories in this video. I try to leave, as each theory to be about 2 minutes just for the sake of time, and I still went way over what I wanted to do. So I really didn't have enough time to go into them all, is what I'm trying to say. But I really appreciate you listening. Check up here the title cards for, other videos. I've done the first part to the iceberg, which you should definitely check out if you haven't already. I've done a pink letter video, which I am very proud of also, that I think I nailed pretty well. I also have a couple Harry Potter videos on the channel. I'm still working on those, by the way. If you do check those out, fair warning, the audio for like the first couple is pretty rough because I had a really rough, microphone. But I am still working on them. I'm trying to get away from, just putting my voice behind some images. I want to make more interactive content, but, animation is very difficult. I'm still learning. That's why the Harry Potter videos are kind of, taking a while. But if you like them, please let me know, of course. Thank you all again so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time on the Nerdscape.